Elena, is Grandpa being difficult again? Well, sort of. He hurt his leg. And you know how it is with the elderly, stubborn and needy. It's exhausting sometimes. I wish they'd consider those of us who have to look after them. Rosie, that's a bit harsh, don't you think? I don't mean it like that, but he's really starting to slow down. I just can't handle the constant drama of old age. You're more used to it, so you'll manage just fine. You know, the other day, my husband's grandfather, Oscar, fell in the garden, hurt his leg. It wasn't too serious, but he's 82. We're keeping him in bed to make sure it doesn't get worse. But my mother-in-law? She won't even go near him to help. I'm Elena. I'm 30 and married to James. We live with his family, and I've been part of their company for 8 years. James was my boss before we started dating. The company was founded by his grandfather, and back then, his father, Dylan, was the president, and Grandpa was still handling all the important matters. But when Grandpa turned 80, he decided it was time to pass on most of the responsibilities. You've earned your rest. Let Dylan take over, my mother-in-law said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Grandpa-in-law is tough but fair, known for his kindness. Dylan, on the other hand, is a little immature. He never really speaks his mind and lets my mother-in-law call the shots. I never met my grandmother-in-law. She passed away before I joined the family. James and I started dating after working together on the product planning team, and I admired him for his energy, though sometimes he came off as a little self-righteous. I grew up without a father, just my mom, and after she passed away 2 years ago, I found myself without any family except for my in-laws. I had to quit my job to care for her in her final year, and, despite my mother-in-law's obvious disapproval, Grandpa supported me fully. He said, "It's only right you care for the mother who raised you. Don't worry about a thing." Thanks to him, I didn't have to worry about money. But now, things have changed. Ever since Grandpa passed the company to Dylan, the way they treat him has shifted. He's being ignored more and more, and it hurts. It's as if he's become irrelevant, like they think he doesn't matter anymore. I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him with indifference. Hey, don't you think your attitude, Rosie, and yours too, toward Grandpa is a bit cold? So what? Grandpa talks to you, and you barely acknowledge him. You don't even try to help him. Like I have time for old people. You're the one with all the free time. You handle it. That's not how you should talk. Shut up. I'm tired. Don't keep nagging me. This is how it is. They won't listen to me, no matter what. Grandpa never complains, but I can see the sadness in his eyes. I'm the only one who still talks to him at home. Grandpa, it's such a beautiful day. Why don't we go for a short walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well. A little fresh air would do you good. Thank you, Elena. Let's go out for a bit. We strolled to the park, where kids were running around, their laughter filling the air. Grandpa watched them with a soft smile. Dylan and James used to enjoy moments like this too, he said, his voice tinged with melancholy. I was always too busy with work to spend time with them. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise them properly. I felt a pang in my chest as he spoke. Dylan is my father-in-law, and James is my husband. I wanted so badly for them to be kinder to Grandpa, but I didn't know how to change things. Later, my in-laws suggested building a house for Grandpa-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is all over the place, impractical. It's become more trouble than it's worth. Instead of sinking money into repairs, why not build a new one in a better location, a more convenient one? Oscar's getting older. He got lucky last time with just a leg injury, but we can't predict what'll happen next. A barrier-free house would make things so much easier if we ever need to care for him long-term. I agree. We could even put Oscar's room in the center, so it's easier for everyone to help him. Yeah, that works. Perfect. Let's make it happen. And as for the cost, if it's a house for all of us, I'll cover it. You can talk to Mr. Jones about the finances. Typical Oscar, my mother-in-law said with a smile, clearly pleased with herself. To me, it seemed like they only praised him when money was involved. But if moving to the new house meant everyone would pitch in to care for Grandpa, I thought it could be a good thing. Mr. Jones, the company's in-house counsel, had been managing my grandfather-in-law's personal finances for years. Grandpa trusted him completely, and I always felt like he genuinely cared about Grandpa's well-being. Sometimes, I even thought he treated Grandpa more like a father than his own sons did. That gave me some peace of mind, knowing someone like him was around. Although I wasn't privy to the specifics of the new house's construction, my mother-in-law seemed pleased. The three of them, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and James, flipped through interior design magazines, discussing everything with a level of enthusiasm that made it seem like the project was already a done deal. But then came the bombshell. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law was carrying a debt of $1,820,000. Wait, what's this about $1,820,000? I blurted out. Apparently, Grandpa had co-signed a loan for a friend's struggling business, and now the debt had become his responsibility. Wait, are they going to take the house? It's still under construction. right? No, it's fine. The contract's already signed, and as Rosie mentioned, the house is in the president's name, so it's protected. My mother-in-law looked relieved at the reassurance. Oh, thank goodness, I'm so glad we did it my way, she said with a smug smile. That's when I learned the house was in my father-in-law's name, not Grandpa's, even though Grandpa had paid for it. Of course, this seemed like something my mother-in-law would orchestrate, but it made me wonder why they didn't even consider using the house as collateral to pay off the debt. Hey, this debt's Grandpa's fault, right? It has nothing to do with us or the company, I asked. Well, it's signed in Oscar's name, my father-in-law answered dismissively. So, it's not our problem. Exactly, no need to worry about it, he said with a shrug. I didn't understand how they could be so calm about it, but since Grandpa didn't speak up during the conversation, I kept quiet. After all, it wasn't an issue I could resolve. A few days later, though, I noticed something unsettling. Grandpa's behavior started to change. Grandpa, what do you want for lunch? I asked, trying to keep the mood light. Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50, you have no right to call me that, he snapped. I was taken aback. Huh? Sorry, Grandpa, I mean, Oscar. I was just lost in thought. At first, I thought it was a slip of the tongue, just a moment of confusion, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel a deep unease as I approached him. Grandpa, what are you doing? Where's your meal? Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50, you don't have the right to call me that, he snapped. I froze. Sorry, I meant, Oscar, you ate earlier, didn't you? His confusion was becoming more frequent, and I couldn't help but wonder if the massive debt of $1,820,000 was affecting him more deeply than I realized. Perhaps it was the shock of the financial burden, combined with the lack of support from his family, that was accelerating his decline. His condition felt like a double blow. I suggested we take him to the hospital, but he stubbornly refused. I suspected he didn't want to acknowledge the possibility of dementia. I turned to my husband for help, but he dismissed my concerns with a wave. It's not that bad yet. If we go to the hospital, everyone will know. We don't need that kind of drama. He was more concerned about the public perception than his father's well-being. We have time, let's wait a little longer, you'll handle it, right? His indifference made me furious. Grandpa, please, let's get you checked out, I urged. Who are you? What do you want from me? You're trying to trick me, aren't you? He raged. The hurt in his voice almost broke me. I could feel the tears welling up as I watched the man who had always been kind and strong now reduced to someone unrecognizable. My mother-in-law, however, stood off to the side, laughing. Even when he was the chairman, it's all over for him now, she said dismissively. Now everything, even the company, is Dylan's. Her words felt like a slap in the face. Grandpa's still here, I protested. He's worked hard for this family his whole life. But my mother-in-law just chuckled. He's a liability now. Soon, he'll forget everything. He'll be wandering around, drooling. Just thinking about it gives me chills. I was livid, but my grandfather-in-law just smiled weakly, his eyes distant. See, this old man doesn't understand anything anymore, she continued, laughing cruelly. I wanted to scream at her, but I held back. The new house would soon be ready. Maybe, just maybe, things would change once we moved. I couldn't give up on the faint hope that the family might finally show some gratitude and kindness to Grandpa. 2 months later, the house was finished. I spent the last few days packing everyone's things, my in-laws and my husband's belongings taking up most of my time. My father-in-law's and my own things sat untouched. Whenever I tried to get my own things in order, I was immediately assigned more tasks by my in-laws. I tried not to let it get to me, reasoning that I could always move the smaller items later since the house wasn't going anywhere. But when moving day arrived, I got the shock of my life. After I finished helping move most of the belongings, I went to check on my father-in-law, but my husband intercepted me. You and Grandpa can stay here, he said, almost nonchalantly. What are you talking about? I stammered. You're saying we won't move to the new house? You and Grandpa will stay here. We don't need the extra baggage at the new house, he said, his words cutting deep. I'll take care of Grandpa's debt. You'll have plenty to do here, taking care of him. I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Were we being abandoned? Was it really happening like this? My in-laws, without a second thought, left us behind, as if we were nothing. They would live in the new house, while Grandpa and I were left to fend for ourselves in the old one. I couldn't fathom it. How could they do this? And how was I supposed to explain this to Grandpa? As I made my way back to the rear room, the weight of everything hit me. I had always intended to care for Grandpa, but now, facing this abandonment, I felt lost. When I found him, his back was turned, but as soon as he sensed my presence, he slowly turned around. Have they gone already? He asked, his voice a shell of its former strength. For a moment, I didn't recognize the man before me. His face was different, older, more withdrawn. I stammered, unsure of how to respond. I thought maybe a new symptom had appeared, but then Grandpa's face softened into a smile. "Mr. Jones came," he said, his voice filled with an unfamiliar confidence. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?" "Yes, everything's done. Let's go, shall we?" "Where are we going?" I asked, confusion clouding my mind. "To the new house," he answered, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I followed him without fully understanding what was happening. A few weeks later, my mother-in-law and husband began calling me nonstop, but Grandpa, in his new resolve, declared that he wouldn't entertain their calls anymore. The tension was mounting, I could feel it, and when my husband called, I knew the situation was about to take a dark turn. Divorce was on the horizon, and I wasn't sure where I stood anymore. "Hey, Elena, is Grandpa with you?" My husband's voice crackled through the phone. "When I went to the old house, it was up for sale," he continued, his tone accusatory. "It's not worth $1,820,000, so, you can't repay the debt, is that why you did it?" I knew what he was implying, but I needed to hear him say it. "What do you mean? Did you put Grandpa on?" I faltered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad said he couldn't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous." I could hear the frustration building in his voice. "Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director," he said, his words sharp with disbelief. "Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder. A shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held, and now Dad's been dismissed as president, but the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought it was better to hand over the company to him. The executive director must have deceived the old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid. You seem to be misunderstanding something, but Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before." I paused for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I had once believed that Grandpa's behavior was due to dementia, but now, I realized it was all part of a plan he had set in motion long before. He had suspected the betrayal and pretended to be losing his mind to observe how my in-laws and husband would react, and they had fallen right into his trap. I couldn't help but suppress a small, bitter laugh. It was almost too perfect, everything unfolded just as I had expected. Grandpa had been playing the long game. "To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies," he had once told me, a knowing smile on his face. He had been getting updates from the executive director and Mr. Jones all along. With my grandfather-in-law's departure, my father-in-law and husband had acted with complete disregard for anyone but themselves. They entertained at the company's expense, their arrogance evident to everyone around them. But Grandpa had made a choice. He didn't trust my father-in-law to take over the company, so, he had left it in the hands of the executive director. I turned to my husband, my voice steady but cold. "What about the $1,820,000 debt?" "That's gone now," I answered, the words almost surreal. Grandpa had been a guarantor for a friend's debt, but his personal assets far exceeded that amount. However, I didn't mention that detail to my husband. I didn't want him or my mother-in-law eyeing those assets. The friend who had owed the money was the son of a benefactor who had once helped my father-in-law, and the land that had been left to him was about to be developed into a high-end resort. Grandpa's friend would soon make a fortune from the sale of the land. "Are you kidding me?" My husband's disbelief was palpable. "More importantly, are you guys okay?" I asked, my concern genuine despite everything. "We're not okay," he lamented. "Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?" "What about the mortgage on the house?" I pressed, unable to hold back the truth any longer. "The mortgage on the house?" His voice faltered, confused. "Haven't you realized it yet? The house money should have all been paid by Grandpa," I said, my tone almost pitying. "Dylan signed without checking everything. He clearly didn't have the qualities of a president," I added with a bitter laugh. "You're kidding," he sighed, overwhelmed by the mounting pressure. As a result, my parents-in-law had lost the house they had worked so hard to build. The mortgage they couldn't pay had taken it from them, and now they lived in an old apartment, struggling to repay their debts. Despite their repeated attempts to contact me, suggesting we all live together, I couldn't bring myself to go back to them. It was impossible. In the end, my grandfather-in-law retired from his chairman position and bought an old house in the countryside. "Elena, you can go and live wherever you like, freely," he assured me, his voice warm. "You don't have to worry about living expenses." But I couldn't leave him. "If I'm not in the way, please let me stay with you," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. Grandpa's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, the pain of everything that had happened seemed to wash away. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized, and all the legal steps were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from Grandpa's inheritance. I was adopted as Grandpa's daughter, And I promised to care for him until the very end. Now, the two of us worked together in the fields, side by side. Dad, look at this radish. It's huge, I exclaimed, the warmth of the moment almost overwhelming. Under the pouring sunlight, I found peace in the simple joy of these days. I wished, more than anything, that these moments would last just a little longer.